We are live on all three, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on Instagram. Uh, hey, we good?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me well, sir?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Man, I'm so excited about this. I think I'm excited about all the opportunities I get to have a conversation with our guest. And my brother, I'm glad you found some time. And I know you're very busy and you've been traveling a while, but you're back here. And so I always like to do it face to face, as you know, but sometimes it doesn't work out. But technology allows us to really take advantage of it. Um, so, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, sir. It's a pleasure to have this conversation.
Okay, man, we have an hour, and I want to make sure we are able to cover a great deal of things. First, I want to welcome our audience and everyone who's finding time to jump on this call. I know we have a great deal of individuals who are going to jump on, um, and I hope they're interactive. So if you have questions, I would say this: anybody who's jumping on and is a guest or a friend of mine or a friend of Bahati's, just ask questions now as they pop up. I'll find a way to interject those questions, and we're not going to wait till the end because this is really, like I said, you had written them and said, "What's the topic?" I'm saying, like I said, say to August, you are the topic. All right, this is a conversation. This is being in the village with a fire and you and I talking with other people around, right? And topics just there's no specific topic, but we want to cover really your personal experiences that have led you into the work you're doing now and the inspirations and the impact of your work, right? Both at the policy level, but also at the individual level, right? So that's what TAT Talks is all about. And so again, welcome everybody to TAT Talks. I am welcoming Bahati Kanyamanza. Please pronounce that correctly for me. Your first and last name.
Bahati Kanyamanza. That's
Okay.
correct.
Hey, as an African, there's so much still to learn. I got this strong Western accent, and anybody who knows who knows me understands with my background why that is. Uh, but you're from Congo, Kinshasa. Okay.
Correct.
Alors, c'est un pays francophone. Comme ça, je voulais
We,
prendre un petit moment pour accueillir nos spectateurs francophones. On fait ces conversations de TED Talks en anglais, mais parfois, je voulais prendre des moments pour parler en français pour que je peux ouais, accueillir ceux qui parlent aussi le français. Nous avons fait, on peut faire franglais aussi. Hein. On va essayer de parler beaucoup plus en anglais, mais s'il y a des choses que vous voulez exprimer en français, vous êtes libre à le faire. Il y a le directeur exécutif, c'est Denis Viva. Bonsoir. Oh, bonsoir, soyez le bienvenu. Nous allons commencer. We're going to start again. I just said, hey, Bahati's from Congo Kinshasa, which is a French-speaking country, and I always want to welcome our French speakers as well. But also there's Portuguese and Spanish. So I'm gonna have to learn that when we start speaking to have invitees from those countries as well into our space. But I'm talking too much. It's not a conversation. It's a conversation, but I really want people to get to know you. So let's open up first of all. Hey, brother, tell us about yourself. And when I say that is, where were you again? Born in Congo? How did you grow up? Family, things you enjoy doing, some of the community you lived in. Can you give us a little bit of that background?
yeah, thank you so much, Brother Ehudi Ruben, for having me this evening. It's a pleasure to speak with you and our audience tonight, this evening. My name is Bahati Kanyamanza, like you said. I'm originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo, formerly called Zaire.
Zaire, Mobutu.
Yeah, Zaire under Mobutu
Yeah,
Sese Seko.
yeah.
Yeah, that's I was born under his regime. And as a child, I enjoyed my life in my village, where we had a lot of food, had a lot of land. However much we were living under the dictatorship of Mobutu Sese Seko, we had some kind of peace, where we didn't see bombs and bullets, like later after his regime was invaded by the rebels. So growing up, my role as a child was just to go to school, but also at the same time supporting my parents on the farm, at home. I'm the firstborn of, I think, 10 children. I need to count on my fingers how many we are.
Oh, you gotta think about it. That's all right though.
Yeah. Yeah. And I unfortunately,
Are you there?
yeah, I'm here. I think the internet kicked you out.
Okay, I'm back. I don't know about technical difficulties, but we're good to go.
Okay. Are we now here?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I, yes, I can hear
Okay.
you.
I can hear.
I
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was saying that growing up, I had a nice childhood where I lived in my village with some kind of peace until later when the dictatorship of Mobutu was invaded by the rebels, which forced me to flee the Democratic Republic of Congo to neighboring Uganda in 1999, seek refuge in Uganda at the age of 14. I
Mhm.
didn't live in Uganda until 2016 when I was resettled to the United States.
So, so born, went through the crisis, was in Uganda. You were in a refugee camp. Can you talk to us a little about what that experience was like?
Yes, however much we had some form of peace in Uganda after fleeing war in the DRC. We had challenges in the refugee camp.
Mhm.
These included access to foundational human rights, including access to services like education and health.
Mhm.
By nature, a newly created refugee camp doesn't have these services. With countries where there is what we call encampment policies, everything starts from scratch. There are no schools, there are no hospitals. Basically, there are no what we call infrastructure. Basically, refugees have to start everything afresh. We lived in the camp for about 10 years, but what we had seen so far, what we had witnessed is challenges related to health issues. Women were dying in big numbers, pregnant mothers. For our audience, the camp was about 60 miles away, according to the estimates. The hospital, the referral hospital we had was 60 away from the refugee camp or the refugee settlement. And
So
that required,
there was no hospital on site, nothing to care for people.
we had small health centers, but these small health centers were just to treat minor illnesses like malaria or
Mm.
headache. If you are moving on the farm and you had an injury, those were major kind of treatments they would treat. But when it comes to major health issues, like women giving birth, serious illnesses, people had to travel 2 hours from the refugee camp on an impassable road.
Wow.
Schools were a huge challenge. We had two primary schools
Okay.
serving a population of 60,000 estimated refugees. and the
hold on.
neighboring community of Ugandans of 90,000. These two populations had to compete for space in these two schools.
60,000 60,000 people in the refugee camp.
Yes, most of whom were school-going children.
And were they all from, I assume that, again, all from the DRC? Uh, and so how did a lot of them, all from there, but how did a lot of them make their journey? I mean, it's definitely by road, fleeing, and you personally, with your family, what was your family situation too?
Well, I don't know if we can exhaust my story in 1 hour. I fled by myself in 1999, separating from my mom. But later, I reunited with my father, whom I had again separated with in 1996. Reuniting with him in the refugee camp, and unfortunately, he died of illnesses in the refugee camp, like many other people who
Sorry.
did not have access to health care.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I was saying that by the time we had lived in the refugee camp for about 10 years in 2005, we had seen huge challenges, including the challenges that they just explained, but most importantly, the challenges related to young people not accessing education. Some of them were getting married as early as 12 or pregnant as early as 12. We had seen what I would call silent child trafficking, where young people would leave the refugee camp being misled that they will find a better life outside the refugee camp. We had seen a lot of families losing their loved ones because of lack of access to basic health care, because of the challenges related to facilities like hospitals and infrastructure. We didn't have a support system to help young people, like schools, to access quality education. And substance usage was becoming a common theme among young people. And at the same time, we are still new in the refugee camp, trying to figure out our new life in the refugee camp, where we had our host community, where we didn't understand the language, the culture. All these brought in some kind of misunderstanding and the conflicts. Definitely by nature, when you bring two groups of people together who don't share language, a culture, there are always issues for that. So for 10 years, that's how we had lived in the refugee camp. And we kept being worried about our future, whether we went back to the Congo, to the South Sudan. We had refugees from Somalia, from Eritrea. And the question was, what will happen to this population, especially the young people who are either being born in the refugee camp or found themselves in the refugee camp when they are very young. So at the same time, we were very poor. The camp situation wasn't a funny one, relying on international aid, but also growing our small food on the farm in the refugee camp, which had been allocated to us by the government of Uganda. And we realized that however much organizations were doing their best, we still had huge challenges. We didn't see any change in our daily living, in our daily lives, and stuff like that. So with other young people, we decided that we need to do something. I was 22 then, my friends were around the same age. We decided that we needed to do something for our community, and that's how we came up with an organization, CIOTA, which is an acronym for Koburwas International Youth Organization to Transform Africa. And our goal was to create education program for these young people in the refugee camp, because we felt that education was the only way to solve our problems in the long run, regardless of where we ended. Either we remained in the refugee camp in Uganda, either we went back to our home countries, or if those who got resettled to a third country, we felt education was key for us to be able to solve some of the problems.
Mhm.
The we we were broke. We are super young as well, and also at the same time, being in a foreign country where you're still figuring out your life. We are motivated by the problems we are facing, but also making sure that we do what we could in our own situation. We built our own structure. We asked the government of Uganda to allocate us a place, a piece of land,
Mm-hmm.
which became like a hub for us to build a local structure. And it became what we would call a learning center where young people had to come in, interact with one another, motivate one another, and then along the way, we realized that there were children who had fled either with other populations who were fleeing their countries, or they just followed a massive group of people running away from separating with their parents. So we picked around 40 children, brought them into this structure, and we started teaching them, cleaning them. Some of them were very sickly. And the piece of land which we had been allocated, we requested more land for farming to grow more food. And we started mobilizing the community to provide some kind of labor on these farms, to provide some food produce from their own farms. And then we use this to feed the children, but also to resell the surplus to hire either volunteer teachers or buy scholastic materials to educate these children. So to cut the story short, our organization has a history of creating a classroom after a classroom for these children, starting from 40 children, and now educating 1,500 students from pre-K to high school, and sending over 100 students to various colleges around the world. So for 10 years, that was my life, focusing on my personal education, but also building this program for the children in the refugee camp.
Wow. I mean, I think, people have an idea of what a refugee camp looks like due to, what they see on social media. Yeah, there are really challenges and difficulties and some gruesome things that you said you've seen. But a lot of that inspired you to still live a life, right? You guys weren't dead. It's like, okay, we're in this situation. We have help from some seems like from the Ugandan government, from other nonprofit organizations, but it wasn't enough. You didn't cross your arms and say, okay, we're just gonna live like this. You actually went and did something. I think what stands out to me is like life still had to be lived. Solutions still had to be made. That was not enough, and so you had to close those gaps. And just because a child or is in a refugee camp, education still needs to provide it, some type of training, and it seems like you guys really did that. Um, and again, you sold. You recap. I didn't understand maybe correctly. Is like you asked for support from the local people around the refugee camp, and then growing produce. That's what you sold in order to sustain the project. How was that sustained overall?
Yeah, when we registered the community-based organization, we were super young. We didn't know about fundraising. We didn't know about how non-profit organization operate.
So
So
in your
the on
teens, sorry, in your teens, you were super young. So like, 14, 10 years, 24 when you came. So all of this happened between 14 and 24.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the only resource we had was to mobilize our community for action. We moved to churches, we moved to mosques, we moved to villages to tell community members that these are our problems and we can't wait for anybody. We have to do something. So we decided to make sure that at least every parent or guardian who brought a child into a program, we agreed on the quantity of food they needed to bring to the school. But also for those who could not, we agreed that they could provide the labor on the farm, which the government of Uganda had allocated to us, so that we can continue supporting the program. But along the way, 5 years down the road, We met external people, some people from America, the UK, who started telling us that there are people who give money to do the kind of work we are doing. So it was a surprise and a shock to some of us because we didn't know that even people give money, grants, and donations and things like that. So they started guiding us on how to fundraise, how to connect with the international world. And then we started getting some kind of scholarships, people committing to sponsoring some of the children in our programs. And we have kept that tradition of making sure that we keep connecting to the rest of the world, but also making sure that our story is heard across the globe.
And he said some individuals got scholarships to come for further education in the U.S. So a child could have been born in a refugee camp, went through all their education in the camp, and then from there get scholarship to go overseas.
Yeah, now we have partnerships where some of our students come to the US, some go to France, others go to Kenya, others go to some other African universities like Africa University in Zimbabwe. We have a partnerships with organizations like the MasterCard Scholars Program, which selects a few African students to attend university, and some of our students have been lucky to be selected among those to go to attend their college outside the refugee camp in Uganda.
Mm-hmm. I think just hearing that too. Also, I hear hope. Right, you're in a it is a seemingly hopeless situation, and so putting together this initiative gave hope again to a lot of the community and the young people there. And I assume a lot of those, I know that a lot of those young people had faced death, losing family members, losing moms, dads, cousins, and the trauma that caused. So could you speak a little bit to how you handle those traumatic situations with individuals? And did you ever connect with your mother?
I reconnected with my mother 15 years later.
From the time you got to the camp, and then
Yes.
15 years later, still at the camp, you were connected with her?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. When it comes to the traumatic experiences for refugee and immigrants like us, I think sometimes in my own view, it could be different from others. Sometimes when you have huge problems, you tend to focus on the bigger problem ahead of you and worry about the future than actually what you're going through. So I think most of us felt like the only thing we needed was just an opportunity. And when you speak to many refugees and immigrants, they are leaving their homes not because they want to live. Many of them are seeking either safety because they are fleeing war and persecution, and they want a place where they can feel safe and rebuild their lives. And for us, access to education was one of the most important elements for us to see a better future ahead of us, but also making sure that we fit in the society. Because when you look at the population of millions of people, the UNHCR has just published that there are 122 million of people plus displaced globally right now. And access to education, you'll see where even the UNHCR has published data that shows that access to education is one of the big challenges for forcibly displaced people, including refugees. So I think for us, that's what we wanted to see. We wanted to make sure that the population is educated. One thing I didn't mention is that education is important, formal education is important, but also we look at some of the aspects of the challenges on how we ended in the refugee camp. For example, tribalism. For
Mm.
example, conflict. We started by including programs, for example, entrepreneurship, peace building program, leadership programs. the leadership program is to start encouraging these young people to learn about the problems that have affected our communities and the continent at large. Entrepreneurship is to start encouraging our young people to think about possible ventures they can create at our community level, because this is our community. We are not going anywhere. We are not leaving. Um, and peace building program is, yes, we are here now. How do we move forward? So when you look at our program, our education in our schools, it's a holistic education where we expose our young people to all these aspects, basically to prepare them to be the leaders we want to see tomorrow. For example, the DRC has been going through a conflict for over 30 years. And the question is, for how long can we continue like that? So if we have young people who are going to lead our communities together, I mean, tomorrow, how do you start preparing them to understand these issues and the long-term implication on our socio-economic development in our own communities, in our own countries? So our young people are exposed to these aspects, and not just like sitting in a school and implement a national curriculum. Is also discussing about these issues that have affected us, that have led us to be where we are. We are no longer in our homes. We saw safety in Uganda, and now we are in the United States. Many of the refugees are in Canada. Those who are lucky, by the way. So we look at what could be the possible solution for our issues in the future, not just like right now, but also start to prepare these young people to understand that we are the solution. We are part of the solution, regardless of who we are, regardless of our differences, our tribal differences, our religious differences, our political differences. We still remain in this community. If we burn it down, we are burning ourselves down. So I think that's one of the big aspects I'm proud of in our work, making sure that we look at our problems and find ways on how we can solve them without resorting to violence.
You said a mouthful, because I think a few things that popped up is cultural intelligence. I think, I've read a lot of articles and hear about this thing about cultural intelligence. I've come to understand, for me, that who are the most culturally intelligent people? Refugees. And I think you sharing that yeah, you provided the education and the opportunity, but you also stepped back and looked at the holistic approach. Like I said, why are we even here in this situation as refugees? One, it's a political thing that most people don't have say-so control over, but there's also some secondary things that you mentioned about tribalism and conflict that has intersected a lot within the community, which also leads to individuals being refugees. And so, I think you tackle some very tough issues, but you also wanted to get at the root of the issues, because yes, we can equip individuals with knowledge, but we also have to change their mindset. How do they view the other? Because you're in a common situation in the refugee camp. Let's try to put all these things aside and look at the common good, which is beneficial not only to each individual, but to the community as a whole. And so I think, I'm glad, and that work still continues till this day. I think it's 18 years from reading your bio, and you have individuals running that program still today, correct?
Yeah, 20 years. It will be 20 years in December this year.
20 years. Ooh. All right. I think we'll get back onto that, but then you come to the US. Tell me about that journey. Yeah. How was that? I mean, you did a whole bunch of stuff here, so you're not coming as without any knowledge or any I would say professional background. You actually came with it that you learned. And so how was that journey to the US?
Well, that's another phase of life. It's a new chapter. Finally, I get approved. To cut the story short, I get approved for resettlement, and then I'm told that I am leaving the refugee camp. I'm leaving Uganda to resettle to the United States. I get here. And it's a new life, it's a new environment, it's a new system in which we have to navigate. So I think for it's exciting, but also scary because
Mhm.
you're coming to the unknown. Sometimes we are told by those service providers that you're gonna be happy, you're gonna make money, children are gonna go to school and things, which is good.
Yeah.
It's a huge opportunity, but also at the same time, you're landing in a new system that requires you to navigate and be able to master and be able to survive in it. When you look at the education system, registering kids in school is a system, acquiring healthcare is a system. Transportation is a system. I remember at one time I made myself a superstar because of the work I was doing. I knew a few people in the US, and someone told me that they were in New York. I was like, well, I'm going to take a bus from New Jersey to New York, super close, or take a subway. So I remember asking a few individuals that, hey, I'm taking this train going to this particular place, and they will tell you, oh yeah, this is the right train. By the time I realize I'm halfway in a unknown place, and someone tells me you boarded the wrong train.
Where did you end up? Do you remember?
I have no idea. I got lost in Manhattan on a train for a capata.
All right. Okay.
But also think about it. You're going for a job interview or you're going for a medical appointment. Then boom, you take a wrong bus because buses here are numbered. Trains are numbered. They have different destinations. Sometimes you want to take this train, you take a train going to the opposite direction, and realize you're in the middle of nowhere. I remember I was supposed to meet some guy. I had like a full hour to get there and a full hour to be ready waiting for him. I take a wrong train. For over 2 hours, I was just navigating, actually planning on how to get home. I told the guy, I'm sorry, we can't meet today. I didn't tell him that I got lost in Manhattan. So now think about this. I came to the US when I was a fully trained teacher and a lawyer.
Can I interject before you go into that because I can open up. So
Yeah.
when you came, how was that decision process? I didn't ask that of how do they make those choices within to see who leaves the camp? How's that look?
That's an interesting question. So, according to the UNHCR, there are three durable solutions for refugees.
Okay.
Now, number one is voluntary repatriation, where refugees who fled their home countries can voluntarily return to their home countries. Now, the question is, if you take an example of my DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's 30 years when war and conflict is ongoing. Who in their right mind decides to go back to the same conditions they fled? That's one of the durable solutions. The second durable solution is local integration. For example, as a refugee in Uganda, then I will become a Ugandan. Globally, there is no country that has laws for local integration. But also looking at it, these countries that host refugees are countries that are low income or middle income, struggling to meet the needs of their own population. Uganda hosts about 2 million refugees. Which country will commit? Which country will commit to add about 2 million refugees to their population? It's a population burden, right? And then the third solution, according to UNHCR, is resettlement to a third country, the process that I came through in the US. So resettlement, according to the data, it resettles 1 or less than 1%. According to UNHCR again, we are over 40 million refugees registered globally. So if you take 1% or less than 1%, how many people are resettled globally every year, right? And also remember the other factors like the politics. Our government closed the resettlement program. They say no more refugees coming to the United States, even those who were almost on flight to come to the United States. So resettlement is also at the mass of politics, right? So now, if you're super lucky to be selected among the less or 1% of refugee resettlement, it's like you've hit a jackpot. It's a very huge opportunity. So the way resettlement works, the resettling countries, the receiving countries, for example, the US, they partner with the UNHCR, IOM, and other refugee resettlement agencies in the US and outside the US to identify refugees, most of whom are either refugees at risk. These include the women, girls who faced rape or persecution in their home countries, children, basically families. These individuals or families that cannot easily return to their home countries, but also continuously living in the refugee camp. It's a huge disservice for them. So they are selected and they go through a process, vetting process, which takes also ages. My process took about 6 years. And I will say my process is one of the most effective process. There are those who stay in the process for 10, 15, even 20 years.
Wow.
Now you're finally told that you're leaving, you're going to America, and then you, after you're done everything, you go through medical checks, you go through security checks by these security agencies. So once you've been approved, you're good to go. Then you're given your ticket, and then if you have a family, you fly, and then you're resettled to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you come, you're received by resettlement agencies that helps you find an apartment, that helps you find schools if you have kids, find some kind of medical insurance and stuff like that. They help you basically to resettle. But also the program runs between 3 and 6 months. And after those 3 to 6 months, you're expected to be self-sustaining, self-sustainable, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the real integration starts. Now of course, you can go to these resettlement agencies. Traditionally, these resettlement agencies, they are already receiving a new group of every 3 to 6 months. They are receiving a new group of refugees, and they cannot go to those ones they brought in already, who are already having apartments. They have jobs. But also remember, at the same time, you're still new. It's just 3 to 6 months. And most of the refugees and immigrants, for example, from my refugee community, they came without speaking English. I was resettled in New Jersey. I would
Okay.
receive a call, for example, from North Carolina, somebody calling and saying, like, I took a walk, I lost my way, I can't find my apartment. All these houses look the same.
So you're in New Jersey. You know somebody in North Carolina who got lost walking in their neighborhood. So they call you in New Jersey to help them get home.
And they can only call you, for example, let's take an example of my mom. My mom does not read or write. So
Okay. Yeah.
if you call her on WhatsApp, she'll
Yeah.
mark your headshot, the photo on your WhatsApp. So she'll be
Mhm.
scrolling through her dialed numbers, and then whatever headshot she finds, then she'll start calling. So she cannot go to her phone book, her contacts, for example, and easily identify a number. So these are some of the people we resettled to the United States. And then after 3 to 6 months, you expected them to be self-sustaining, finding jobs, speaking English, and all that. It's a huge, huge, huge challenge. So coming to the United States, of course, comes with its own burden. But I think for me, every person has their own opportunity and challenge.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. After 6 months, I think I landed on a full-ride master's scholarship
Okay.
through School for International Training in
Okay.
Vermont. And then I was able to navigate and pursue my master's degree in sustainable development, focusing on policy advocacy, which
Okay.
again helped me to understand policy advocacy, how to advocate with institutions, designing policies, but also to be a better advocate, building on my teaching, my community building, mobilizing, and my law degree. So that gave me the opportunity to tap into opportunities. Otherwise, I would be still working in a warehouse. I've met doctors, engineers, lawyers who are cleaning at the airport. So it's very brutal. Imagine you've left your home country, you're a very good medical doctor, practicing medicine for 10 years, and the only thing you can do is clean the airport. It breaks my heart.
So you did your master's in sustainable development, but you did a law degree prior to that? What was your undergraduate?
Oh, my undergrad was law in Uganda, Kampala.
Also, you did that in Uganda, Kampala. And then,
Yeah.
so it was easy to get into after doing all those transfers to get into the master's program in
Correct.
Vermont. Okay, cool. And you said something about warehouse. Did you start working? Were you doing some work in a warehouse when you initially came? What was your kind of working to sustain yourself?
I did all the jobs. I worked in warehouses. I worked in the bakeries making bread.
Mm-hmm.
I went to people's yards to clean. People were very generous. I'll tell them, hey, we do this work. They will ask me, do you have a license? I'm like, no, I don't have this license, but I can do the job. For example, there is a family that wanted to plant trees, and we are going to hire a professional and with the trucks and whatever materials, machines to come and plant a tree. I was like, oh, we do this in Africa. I can do this. So they're like, how do you do that? So they got me a contract to pay me, I think it was decent pay. I think $30 an hour. I was like, I'll make this money. So I started doing it, and I did it better than the professionals. They said, what was your profession in Africa? I said, no, we do work on the farm. We know how to do this. I cleaned their yard properly. I planted their trees. Everything was looking neat. So whoever visited them or whoever they spoke to looked for me to do the same job. So I did all the jobs because I came in here with a family. I needed money to provide. So I used to be at school during the day. Especially in my second year, I had a stipend for supporting in my first year, but also the second year was very rough. I had to make sure that I support my family, but also making sure that I continue to pursue the program and building on that. So it was very difficult. I did every type of job to make money to be able to survive
Yeah,
and build myself
yeah.
here.
So definitely you were a go-getter. You were already marketing, you had entrepreneurship, you had a lot of those skill sets are really already embedded in your experience at the refugee camp, your experience with conflict. And so they're basically transferable skills here that you learned both in the formal, the informal, and then you learned in the formal, and then you had the education and then the opportunity which you took advantage of in order to develop a process or a direction you were going. So that's very encouraging. I want to. I know we're going to talk too much about policy because we can get into that, but the work you do now is with the International Refugee Assistance Project. Can you speak to what that entails and that work that you do there?
Yeah, IRAP, International Refugee Assistance Project, is a legal aid and advocacy organization providing legal aid to refugees and immigrants across the globe, but also advocating for better immigration policies across the globe. So my job in the organization is to help manage our global partnerships. And
Mm-hmm.
these partnerships are with partners, for example, refugee-led organizations that work at the local level in their own communities to address some of the critical challenges I have been mentioning in their own communities. But also broadly, I have been working towards influencing policy, but also advocating for better immigration policies, inclusion of refugees in decision making, refugee leadership, because when you look at our system, the system was designed without refugees and still
Mm-hmm.
continues to work without refugees. And now
Mm-hmm.
the question is, how can a system that was designed for a group of people without them can effectively address their own issues? I'll give you an example. I wrote an article on refugees on XCOM. The XCOM is a body that leads the UNHCR. It decides on the expenditures, on the budget, it decides on the priorities, the goals, and the programs. The XCOM is comprised of diplomats,
Okay.
right? These diplomats are picked by representative countries from, for example, host communities. Let's take an example. I was a refugee in Uganda. In Uganda, I was not allowed to vote. By nature, refugees cannot participate in the political processes of the countries where they are hosted. But Uganda picks a diplomat to come at the UN to represent refugees. But this diplomat is a political leader who is either elected by his own people or is appointed by the government to represent the government interests and priorities. And then Congo, where I fled, my country, a broken system that led me to flee to Uganda, picks a diplomat to go to the UN in Geneva to represent me, right? But the system already failed me, and that's why I ended up in a second country or even a third country. But these are the guys who are sitting up there to decide the fate of refugees. So that's not fair, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you come to international organizations, for example, IRAP, I'll give an example of IRAP, an organization I work for. I'm free to speak about that, right?
Okay.
So we are headquartered in New York, right? We sit in our nice office in New York. We designed, for example, a program for refugees in my former refugee camp.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us might have not even been there.
Mm-hmm.
We have just seen news and blah, blah, blah. And then we just say, oh, this program will work for refugees, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So most of these organizations have good missions, good intentions, but they are disconnected with the issues they are addressing.
Mm-hmm.
So what refugee leaders, including me, advocating for is inclusion of refugees in issues that affect them.
Mm-hmm.
Engage them.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them what they want. If you read my article on refugees on XCOM, I give an example of corn, maize, like our people call it.
Mm-hmm.
For 5 years, the World Food Program was giving us corn in my former refugee settlement or camp. But at the same time, we were growing a lot of corn that was rotting on the farm. And actually, the corn we are growing was much better than from the World Food Program. Now, imagine a population of 60,000 receiving corn for 5 years, every month. How much corn was wasted? We threw the corn on the farm because it wasn't a good corn for us to eat. We had the better corn. So in my head, I imagine if this corn, what our people needed in my former refugee camp was the market for our corn, not new corn to come to us.
Access,
So
the market,
yeah, and you can easily see the World Food Program had a good intention of feeding refugees in my former refugee camp, but we didn't need the corn. We needed the market for our corn because we already had enough corn. So what we are advocating for is when you engage refugees and immigrants in issues that affect them, number one, you redesign programs that meet their needs. That's number one. If they're in the leadership positions, they will be able to make decisions based on their lived experience of displacement. And according to the data, they show that solutions that come from affected people from within their communities are likely to be more effective than decisions that are coming from elsewhere. And that's one of the big problems we're having in our sector. People are sitting and making decisions without understanding or engaging the people they want to serve.
Wow. So I'm gonna, man, well, you're definitely coming back, man, because you have so much to break down. So I want to. We don't have much time. We got 10 minutes left, and there's two things I want to talk about before time runs out, and then definitely we'll call you back to look at that, because I think what you were talking about definitely is not dependency. You're trying to just ask people for access so you can be independent in the work, instead of creating this dependency that goes on and sustainability, number one. Number two, which is to your point, which I agree, is that a lot of leadership are individuals who didn't come up from the exact situation, right? So it's, you got leadership of individuals who have never been to the place, who don't travel often there. But I think with education, the idea is that you're educating people so then they can have both the knowledge and the capacity to take care of their own situations. So here's a question: how can the African community in particular, because not all of us, all of us come to US not as refugees, some are coming here for economic reasons. Others just moved because everybody who comes is not a refugee. They just had the opportunity to move. They had job opportunities and just the ability to go somewhere else. But how do you call on Africans to be a part of these solutions?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think a couple of things. Number one, for us refugees and immigrants who find ourselves in this country, leaving politics aside, generally speaking, America is a welcoming country.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to take advantage of that generosity and build from there, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are huge opportunities, for example, for so many, especially the young people. Take advantage of the opportunities here, including education. You can only learn a system through education or through experience being part of the system. But the question is, if you're not qualified to enter a system, how do you learn about it, right? So these countries run on a system. It's not like back home where individuals are a system. This country has a system. So the more we are part of the system, the more we'll be able to benefit from it and also produce a result that can have ripple effect for the people around us, including our families, our communities, even the people back home, right? So taking advantage of the opportunities we have around us and making sure that we use them to the maximum. The other thing I think we can do as immigrants and refugees is making sure that we follow the law, right? We've played a broken system where individuals decided on what is important for them, regardless of the laws or the policies of the country. Make sure that as people, we continue being a good citizens. We continue being productive and contributing members of the society to this country. If you
Civic
invite me,
engagement, basically.
yes.
Yeah,
If you
civic
invite
engagement.
me in your nice house, I see your background. If I'm messing it up, you're gonna kick me out. Definitely, that's the nature, right? So we have to continue working towards making our contribution to the country. And the more we continue being good contributors, the more we'll be valued and the more we'll be accepted. Recently, there are studies that showed that refugees and immigrants between 2005 and 2016, I think 19, contributed 155 billion US dollars to the US economy, right? So that's what we want to continue to see. We bring in cultures, we bring in norms and traditions that can enrich this nation. So those are some of the things we need to continue doing. And then the other thing I think we have to do is continuously learning the culture, right? When we became refugees in Uganda, until we learned about the Ugandan culture, we had a huge disconnect with the people. Of course, it's not every culture that's going to work for you, right? Pick a culture that will work for you. For example, this country is built on work. Let's wake up and go and work. That's one of the cultures of this work, right? Of this country, of the people of this country. Let's be positive. Let's keep working and making sure that we understand what this nation stands for, the cultures and the principles and the ethics that have built this country, and pick them for us to be able to contribute, but also build for the next generation of African immigrants in the nation and back home.
Thank you for those things. I want to segue really quickly into the Spark Change Initiative, because for people who don't know, can you speak to that? Because you are partnering with the African think tank and STEM in the city for this Spark Change Initiative. And so we've been working on the details on that. We're going to launch that very soon. So can you speak to what the Spark Change Initiative is? And then I may share a little bit how the African think tank is involved. And people, we're running out of time. If you have questions, start putting them now, because I want to be able to have those questions within the time span we have with Bahati. Yeah.
Yes, definitely happy to share quickly. So the Sparking Change program is a program which is a partnership between USA for UNHCR, Refugee Congress, and Welcoming America, which which are three organizations, national organizations committed to refugees and immigrants. They came together to work together to put resources in the hands of refugee leaders. Like I've been saying, our advocates have been making some good progress. Organizations are listening. And now the Spark Change program puts grants. It's $12,000 grant to refugees, to select refugee leaders to implement ideas, select ideas in their own communities. Last year I was selected, we were able to reach 100 youth and children. And this year I was fortunate to be selected again. And that's why I was like, okay, I need to collaborate with an institution like African Think Tank and making sure we continue expanding these services to our young people who come into this country without the right network, the right opportunities, the understanding the system and how to navigate the challenges of this country. And we find many young people being consumed by devices they find in this country, like substance usage. Some of them are ending up in jail, but there's a way we can work towards helping these young people, mentor them to be better citizens of the country. At the same time, they will be able to contribute to our economy, but also to our communities. So the Sparking Change program works with different young people, and we have leaders who are working on mental health, women issues, community mobilizing, police issues. So it's a huge opportunity for us to continue working with organizations like I've mentioned the US for UNHCR, Refugee Congress, and Welcoming America to be able to continue bringing ideas and solutions which they can continue to support and making sure that we're addressing our community issues.
Mm. No, I'm excited that the African Think Tank is, you consider African Think Tank as a local African-led organization to do that, because it goes back to that point that you made earlier, is that we in the African diaspora and within the African community, we have to contribute and find the solutions for our own community. Yes, we need the help of those who have maybe not gone through the experience and can support us, but we have to be part in the struggle for what we want to see. And so, you know, with African Think Tank, we've already been doing that with a lot of the activities around our business initiatives, and with our cultural bridge, which actually fits well with what you're talking about, is the cultural bridge education for our youth, but also reaching the youth who are here and dealing with a lot of those issues, substance abuse. We talk about special needs, which is a big factor within the African community that you and I talked about, how we facing those stigmas and challenging the African community to reach out resources and be a part of that. And so we'll be hopefully launching this in the next couple of weeks. And so for those who are watching, just be on the lookout for the information coming. And it's a completely supported program with the support of Bahati, and hopefully something we can establish and continue to build. We got a couple more minutes here, but I want to give you an opportunity just to address quickly in French, because I know I have a lot of individuals from Congo and from Chad and from other parts of Africa and here. Just a word of encouragement en français, un mot d'encouragement pour nos spectateurs francophones, et comment il peut te contacter pour beaucoup plus d'informations.
Merci. Mon français n'est pas très très bien parce que j'ai fui le Congo quand j'étais encore petit. Merci pour m'inviter ici pour cette plateforme pour parler aux gens, les réfugiés, les immigrants qui sont ici. Merci beaucoup. Nous avons dit beaucoup de choses ici. Je pense que les meilleures choses que nous avons dit, que il faut travailler, il faut éviter les choses qui peuvent nous amener les problèmes dans ce pays, mais aussi continuer de travailler ensemble comme les populations des immigrants ici aux États-Unis pour avoir l'union unis, union bien formée, puisque nous avons les chances d'être ici comme les réfugiés ou les immigrants. Merci, merci à Rohidi pour m'inviter. Je suis très content d'être ici avec vous. Merci.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And we're going to start doing maternal languages too, you know, so your native tongue and everything. But hey, man, I say this to all of our guests, but as we continue to grow this platform, we're going to bring individuals back because there's so much that's covered that we can't cover in an hour, that we want to bring individuals back for a longer discussion to really get into the details of this and what you're doing and the work you've been doing, both from your experience. You represent a great deal of people that can take hope and encouragement who are in refugee camps now. You represent, you're an advocate for individuals here, and you talked about a roundtable of advocates. I think that's something I'm going to give you speak. Let me give you 60 seconds or 2 minutes to speak to that roundtable of advocates, because that's something that seems really dear to your heart every time we speak.
Yeah, after I started this work, one of my interests was to work with individual advocates and group of advocates to continue working towards better solutions for the issues we are facing in this nation. So as part of the Sparking Change Grant, I've discussed with Rohidi and other individuals how we can continue to form this unity in a way that we can continue to start brainstorming, partnering and collaborating from as individuals, as a collective, for us to be able to address these problems. Because these are problems that we cannot address alone, we need to engage our elected officials. We need to engage our communities. We need to engage faith groups. And the more we come together, I cannot do this alone. And that's why when I get this money, I reach out to people and say, hey, I have the money here. How can we make sure that we work together? So part of the commitment for this year for the Sparking Change is to continue identifying individual advocates within the Dallas Metroplex. And if you're outside the Dallas, don't feel that you're out of this place. We can continue to share ideas and keep a network of refugees and immigrant advocates working towards addressing their community problems. The more we are together, the better for our community.
Okay. That's a great way to end. I'm going to kick us off before Sidoni writes to me and kicks us off. But again, I appreciate everybody for joining us. Bahati, I really appreciate you. Our friendship that we've developed has been very meaningful. I really appreciate the trust you have in the African think tank and the way you want to continue pushing the refugee and immigrant community to be involved. So you have a great one, and we'll stay in touch. And hey, everybody, join me next week for another TATT Talks.
Right. Thanks so much for having me.
All
Thanks
right.
for everybody
Take care, brother.
for the conversation. Thanks.
Au revoir, mes amis. Bye bye.
Au revoir. Merci.